The following program is suitable for all audiences.
I'm scared of 2 minutes!
Let's let this hard work pay off. Let's cut it loose, ball out, let's put a lot of freaking points up on the board. Let's go. Every day we improve, right? Yep. Reset, job not done. Yes, sir. Play by play, next play mentality. Love you, bro.
I want you to take a second to think about everything every one of you gave up to be in this position right here. I don't care what you did, you had to give something else to have this opportunity. So take advantage of it tonight. Play ball like you love it. Here we go.
Come on, boys. Let's eat up, man. Get it.
Like we talked about earlier this week, it's the opportunity for us to stack this game. Let's go ahead and execute. Let's be the playmakers out there. Let's go. Playmakers on 3. 1, 2, 3. Playmakers.
Yeah. I'm going to challenge you right now for greatness. Yes, sir. You got me? Yes, sir. You take this thing over right now. Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. Trubisky throwing left side of the end zone. Catch is made. Touchdown Bears.
Attaboy! Attaboy! Great job.
Snap. Trubisky throws the slant right. Robinson's in the end zone. Touchdown. A well-executed drive puts the Bears in front.
Come on, boys. Good job. D-Lo, hell of a run, bro.
Bearlissimo.
Welcome to episode number 3 of Bearlissimo. My name is Aldo Gandia. The host of the show is George Bayliss. Bearlissimo. George, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing really well, Aldo. Thanks for having me on again, and I'm hoping you had a really good time at the Senior Bowl. Certainly looks like everyone did, from the parade that they had to all the practices that you were obviously getting some great footage and interviews from. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of that too, if we got some.
Absolutely. And yeah, I have to tell you, they are doing a really great job of hosting that event down there in Mobile, Alabama. And I really encourage people to start thinking about going down next season, because it is not only a great showcase to see these players up close during the practices. You can talk to them. You can take pictures with them. The practices are free and open to the public. The game tickets are very inexpensive. There's lots of outstanding tailgating going on before and after the game. The restaurants in Mobile are great. It really is something every Chicago Bears fan, every football fan should really consider making the trip down to Mobile, Alabama. The event is always held the Pro Bowl weekend, the week before the Super Bowl. So it's from a scheduling standpoint, it kind of works out really well. And again, it's a great opportunity to take a look at all of these prospects, 90 seniors, practice and play, and it's a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll get you out there next year.
Yeah, I hope so, because I mean it just looked absolutely amazing, and that access as well to the players, not only in practices but also on the field after the game and in the stands and things like that. It just looks like an amazing event to go to. Well done, Jim Nagy.
Yes, and Jim has really done a sensational job. Before that, it was, I believe his name is Tom Savage that ran the Senior Bowl. He took it to an excellent level, and now Nagy's taking it even further. He's got a great slogan, "The draft starts in Mobile." I think that really has caught on, and it really is. A lot of that is true. I think the people at the East-West Shrine game might disagree with him a little bit, but you really get great representation from all of the NFL teams. We saw Bill Belichick down there with Josh McDaniel. I saw probably a dozen NFL head coaches, but I did not see our head coach, Matt Nagy, down there. and he either did a really good job of hiding or may have left before I flew into town late Monday night, because a lot of the interviews with players happen on Sunday when they arrive, and so perhaps the Chicago Bears kind of targeted the ones that the GM and head coach wanted to talk to on Sunday and Monday, and they let the scouts do the rest the rest of the week. So I'm not sure, but and I don't know if you heard anything about their presence there, whether they were there or not.
I've not seen a peep, to be honest, and looking at the footage, I was looking for a sort of a visor somewhere in the crowd, but I didn't see it, or the shiny dome. So I didn't see I didn't see our head coach there, and I didn't see Herman Munster, our general manager, there either.
Herman Munster, I love it. All right, well, should we start talking about some players?
Let's do it.
All right, well, let's start with Anthony Gordon, the quarterback who was 8 out of 12 for 69 yards through 2 touchdown passes. I'll tell you something. I went into the week with the kind of Jalen Hurts being my favorite prospect for the Chicago Bears, but I really fell in love with this Anthony Gordon type. We talked to him during the week at practice and talked to him after the game, and he gave us he told us after the game what NFL coaches had told him he needs to work on before the combine.
I got to put on a little bit more weight, make sure I'm a little bit stronger, which, I'm going to get back and start training with my trainer and make sure that I answer that question. I'm going to clean up my footwork under center especially and, just keep on competing.
So what did you see out of Gordon on all the tape that you saw of him?
Well, it was interesting sort of watching the practices into the game and the game itself. Obviously, he was the last of the quarterbacks to come in the rotation. Didn't really have a fantastic offensive line performance in front of him. But what I was impressed with was that footwork, in fact, from when he was under centre. Obviously, a lot of shotgun snaps. You expect him to excel in that with the the Mike Leach type system that he's come from at Washington State University. But what I really liked about him, obviously in the Senior Bowl they only play 3 types of coverage: cover 1, 2, or 3. So you're reading the sort of is it a 1 high safety? Is it are the corners bailing straight away, which is obviously cover 3? In which case you go at the seams. If it's cover 1, middle of the field should be open. So it was very impressive to watch his speed of being able to process the coverage and his reads, particularly in the RPO stroke QB option game that he had as well. Though there was a couple of play calls where he was reading the end very, very quickly, and his decision to give or pull was very good. The 4th down play in particular, where he pulled and then sort of was off balance, was being chased out of the pocket, as all of the quarterbacks seemed to be largely chased all day Sunday, it seemed. But he looked very composed and sort of finding the receiver in the end zone with a sort of a off angle throw. Not ideal footing, not ideal arm angle, but all that sort of the lovely stuff that we see from Mahomes. It was like a Mahomes-like kind of performance, being able to sort of just adjust his arm, be able to get the ball in a position for the guys to catch. He was 6 of 8, but his 2 incompletions were both on the money. So there wasn't one single pass which wasn't a catchable ball. And for me, he actually performed better than Herbert at the Senior Bowl, and certainly more better than Love. Who looked uncomfortable and sort of struggling to make reads and he looked disturbed by the pressure. But Gordon, it didn't look like anything was too big for him. He took downfield shots when they were there, but wasn't afraid just to take the completions when they were presenting themselves very quickly. So his ability to sort of process that coverage, his ability to read what was there in front of him, and his ability to put the ball in a catchable position, for me, was exemplary. So, yeah, he might need to add a little bit of weight in the off-season. But at the end of the day, the one thing that you can't get a quarterback to do necessarily is to become instantly better at reading, and that's what we really need from a quarterback in our system, is to be able to look at the defense that's in front of him, process that information quickly, make the right decision, put it in a catchable position when he's asked to pass, or to hand it off when he's going to hand off, or to pull it when he needs to pull it. And all of those skills, all of those tangible traits that you've got to have as a quarterback, certainly in our system, Anthony Gordon has in abundance. So for me, he really did stand out alone as the only quarterback that was there for me that would suit our system. So irrespective of whether Herbert is available in a position where we might be able to trade up and get him, I actually still think Anthony Gordon would be better for us to look at and see what the buzz is on him, and even potentially, you're going to have to consider, are you going to take him on day 2 or day 3?
Right. Well, and from a value perspective, I totally agree with you. Herbert is probably going to be a top 10 pick, maybe top 15. And Gordon, it looks like he is going to be a round 2 pick. So from a value perspective, I would much prefer Anthony Gordon. And I'm really impressed with his maturity. We talked to him a couple of times, as I mentioned earlier, and every time, he said the right things. Listen to what he says here after the game when he was asked what he's going to bring to an NFL team.
I'm a competitor, first and foremost. I love competing, do everything I can to help the team win, whether that's practice squad, second string, third string, first string. I'm going to do anything I can to help the team win.
And that's the attitude he displayed all week long. And every question that was thrown at him, he answered as if he had taken, coaching tips on how to handle the media. He was authentic. He was genuine. He was smart. He displayed the kind of leadership skills that he could instantly translate to the NFL. I was super impressed with the guy. The only thing that was concerning, of course, was the 199 pounds of weight. But he assured us that he's going to be working with a top-notch athletic trainer, a team of people that were going to add about 10 to 15 pounds of lean muscle. So it's going to be interesting to see him at the combine, because he said that 10 to 15 pounds would be added by the time of the combine. So we'll be taking a close look at his body come Indianapolis in, 3 weeks now?
Yeah, again, 199 pounds is not ideal, but the guy's 6'2". You don't necessarily need a muscle-bound Tim Tebow behind centre. What you need is someone who can read the defence, process the information, put the ball to where it needs to go, make the right decisions, not be flustered in the pocket, be able to motivate people. Those are all skills that, the weight isn't going to dictate. So yes, he needs to be physically bigger to be able to take the physical abuse that he's going to get from being hit. But a lot of that is to do with sort of your suplection, how sort of limber you are, how able you are to roll with a hit, how able you are to take contact. And for me, that's the area where that weight is going to help him is in taking contact. So, it doesn't even matter if a little bit's around his belly. at the end of the day, his arm strength is more than sufficient for what we need it to be. But like I said, the bits where he really excelled to me, and where I was most pleased watching him as a prospect, was in all of sort of that mental processing, and then being able to put the ball in the right place, to be able to not only read the coverage but also read the leverage, and to be able to place the ball to the right side of the receiver on the right route at the right time. The amount of times that he had, it's not a massive body of work, obviously, to watch, but it's what you saw at Washington State University was his ability to process quickly. The only times that wasn't the case at Washington State was when he was having to run for his life and then make throws off platform. So, again, just super impressed by his performance on the week. You do expect some of these answers to be, sort of quarterback speak. Right. Kind of answers. But for me, every time that he spoke to someone, he had a plan of what he was going to say. There was no pregnant pauses. He just seemed alert and sort of sharp and responsive to everything. And that is indicative of his mental processing. Being able to handle an interview is not all that dissimilar in terms of mental acuity to being able to process the defense. You've got to be able to think quickly and know what you're going to do. And that sort of showed not only in his interviews but also on his play on the field.
Yeah, that's a great point. I truly agree with that. Now, you said that you think that his play skills translate well to the scheme that Matt Nagy runs with the Chicago Bears. Any concern about the fact that he doesn't have perhaps the rushing skills of a Mitchell Trubisky running with the quarterback? Running with the football?
At the end of the day, I don't want him to be a running back per se, and Mitch is able to sort of make people miss in sort of downfield and be able to, put a bit of shake and bake and even show a real turn of speed. But what Anthony Gordon gives you is still that same sort of level, similar level of escapability, not the same, slightly less, but still more than athletic enough to be able to make a defensive lineman or end or edge rusher miss. to be able to move up in the pocket, to be able to slide, and to be able to sort of run an RPO successfully, take 8, 9, 10 yards and then get down. I don't need him to run 40 yards per rush, but I'm sure if he gets the opportunities, he's going to be more than quick enough. If he runs in the sort of 4.6 to 4.8 range, that's going to be more than enough for what we need him to do. We don't need him to run 4.5.
You said that he reminded you a little bit of Patrick Mahomes, and we asked him who were quarterbacks that he liked, and he said he kind of modeled his game after Anthony Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. And in particular, when talking about Mahomes, he said, he admired Mahomes and how he throws the ball from different launch points. And he said that playing baseball as a teenager really has helped him throw the ball from lots of different angles. And we saw that on that one touchdown pass on the corner where he kind of side-armed at the touchdown you mentioned just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I'm not saying he is Patrick Mahomes, but that's what you're saying. That ability to be able to launch off-platform throws, to be able to alter the arm angle, the launch angle of the ball itself. And what was also impressive was in terms of throwers of the ball at the Senior Bowl, he had a nice tight spiral to most of his throws. You don't necessarily need to be able to gun it, and sort of take the skin off the receiver's hands. Sometimes you want to throw what they call a sympathetic pass. So it's got to be, fast enough to get it there, but it's also got to be catchable. Very often, if you, a couple of times you saw other QBs that were there, and they were trying to show arm strength when you really didn't need to show it. So, when you've got someone who's sort of 10 to 12 yards away, you don't necessarily have to gun it. And that's where Anthony Gordon excels, in that ability to throw the right kind of pace pass. And a nice tight spiral as well, which is impressive as well.
Yeah, I will really be happy if the Bears select him as a developmental quarterback who could potentially, see action pretty quickly, given the way I kind of forecast his game. And the next player we're going to talk about is someone that Shane Marsaw of the Bears Barroom would love to see in a Bears uniform, and that's running back La'Mical Pirine. Pirine had 7 carries for 42 yards at the Senior Bowl game with a long of 10 yards. He had 2 catches for 17 yards and a touchdown. And after the game, he met the media, and he was asked if he felt like he improved his draft stock. This is what he said.
Honestly, I did. I felt like with interviews, with just being able to compete on special teams and being able to just win one-on-ones, that was my whole goal coming in here, just being able to show these scouts that I can compete, and I just want a chance to be on the NFL team.
I talked to him a couple of times, Bearlissimo, and he talked about a very composed, very mature, very business-like approach he took to the game. He addressed the media from the podium on Media Day on Tuesday, and then again from the podium after the game. Really, really impressive young man. What's your evaluation of him?
Similar to what I said the week before you went, Aldo, in episode 2, was the thing that impressed me about him is he's clearly working on his game, and you see that from the previous season to last. He added a second gear in terms of his sprinting speed. What I saw from him in practice is actually translated to the game. He runs hard, so his contact balance is very good. He's very shifty, approaching the hole and getting through the hole. He does what we call getting skinny. So he looks very small and compact when he's through the hole, and then he explodes out of it. He had 2 one-handed catches on the first drive alone, adjusting to slightly off-target balls, and the second one, the touchdown, was a touchdown on the screen. It was an impressive catch all round and an impressive run, setting his blockers up well, and then sort of using a little bit of power at the end there just to plough himself into the end zone. He's a good all-rounded back, so he's certainly you'd be able to leave him on any one of the 3 downs that you'd like to have a running back on the field, and also would give you a different option as someone that you could split out. So if you imagine him and David Montgomery on the field at the same time, you could put both in the backfield. You could split both out to like slot receiver or something like that. So it gives Nagy another option to be able to get creative. Yeah, we kind of want him to dial down that and start using situational football, but it does give him that option to sort of have what you call scheme flexibility. So you might show 2 running backs in the huddle, but you've actually got 4 wide receivers, or there's lots of variation you can do there. So La'Mical Pirine gives you all of that. Then my only concern is he might have pushed himself up to sort of third round consideration now with his performance at the Senior Bowl. So he might be too rich for the Bears' blood in terms of, unless we, trade one of our second picks down and pick up some thirds and some other picks. That's the concern, is he might have pushed himself out of our reach.
Yeah, I agree with you. His draft stocks definitely went up, and the fact that he's got the skills for today's NFL game, because he caught 40 passes in his senior year, and that's more than he had the previous 3 seasons. So he's proven as a pass catcher, he's a powerful runner. He's got all those skills. I'm with you. This guy could end up being too rich for the Bears' blood. We will see what happens. Any other thoughts on Pirine?
No, I'm good. I'm pretty sure that Shane's probably going to speak about him, so I won't steal all of his thunder. I know he loves himself some LaMichael Pirine.
All right, let's talk about Antonio Gibson. What an interesting player he is. He led the South team with rushing 11 carries, 68 yards. He had a long of 23 yards. He's played receiver at Baylor and has kind of these hybrid skills. What do you see out of him?
I actually see him as a more polished, slightly shorter Cordarrelle Patterson. And if you imagine, Randall Cobb, obviously the guy slaughtered us as Bears fans, I don't know how many years,
yes,
by being a wide receiver and being a running back and being all over the field. So we, whatever defense we tended to put out against them, we were always in the wrong position because they'd just split him out or put him in the backfield, or there was always something they were doing with him. And Antonio Gibson, for me, is faster than Cobb was. So the thing that impressed me, you look at his lower half for a wide receiver and he looks like a running back. You watch him with his hands and his upper body, his ability to adjust to the ball, his ability to be able to sink his hips into routes and then burst out of them. He runs really good routes as well, as his ability to be able to sort of take the ball. The thing that really surprised me about his performance in the Senior Bowl was his ability between the tackles. He was putting his head down and moving people. There was one run, Aldo, I don't know if you remember seeing it. He looked absolutely dead and buried in the backfield, but he managed to get a 2-yard gain out of it. And, how many times have we seen that as a trait that we need to see out of our running backs in Chicago?
Yes.
Too often.
Yes.
The things that I loved about him as a runner, he sees his cutback lanes early and he's willing to go for it because he knows he's got the pace to get there. He's also willing to put his head down into contact and to literally plough people where he needs to get that extra yardage for a first down, as he did a couple of times on third down conversions behind what was the worst line out of the two. It'd be a mismatch against any linebackers in coverage. Safeties who try and cover him would also likely struggle because, like I say, his ability to route run, but also ability to be physical is where he's going to really be a mismatch for most people. On his one thing I did see, Aldo, and I don't know whether you saw it in the practices, but with him being a running back who is so fast, who is so shifty, who clearly has the ability to make people miss, as is shown with a couple of kick return performances as well at Memphis that were outstanding. I mean, over 300 yards in one game alone for Memphis last year. He sold his play fakes well. So when they were sort of putting the ball in his belly, he was taking it, covering it up like the old fullbacks used to, both arms over the ball, making people think that it was in his belly when it wasn't. And the linebackers were held to it, the safeties were held to it. That was an impressive trait that he had. He and Joshua Kelly, out of all the running backs at Senior Bowl, were the two guys that were hitting the line of scrimmage the quickest for me. They were approaching it with pace and certainty. They knew where the hole was. They reacted very quickly and they got through the hole very well. And then once they're in open field, they're scary. I mean, there's no end to a linebacker that's going to want to see them turn them at the line of scrimmage when they've come up to fill a hole, he's made them miss, and then they're going to turn and try and chase him down, because with his speed, he's an opportunity to go at any point. Obviously, I'm a really big fan of Antonio Gibson. I would love to get him on the show if we could.
Yeah.
But the guy is just super impressive, and I would, again, he's another guy that I'm praying and I'm hoping that people underestimate him and he's there for us in the 4th round or 5th round, somewhere around that kind of range. But for me, there's a possibility now, again, that he might have put himself further up the board. But like I say, there's a lot of running backs in this draft that could fall because of other positions like wide receiver and the offensive tackles. So it remains to be seen, but certainly a guy that I think would be an absolute monster if the Bears could get him. I think he's a fantastic player, and I actually encourage people to go and watch his tape, particularly on YouTube or whichever video provider you use.
Yeah, and thank you for correcting me. I mentioned that he was from Baylor. He is, of course, from Memphis. A lot of people were asking him to compare himself to Tony Pollard, who was at the Senior Bowl last year, where they're two totally different players. And I think your comp of Cordero Patterson is especially right on. And he had excellent numbers at Memphis. He produced 735 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns on 38 catches, added 369 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns on 33 carries. And then also he had over 28 yards per kickoff on special teams. So here's a guy who can do it all. He is an instant contributor to any football team that's lucky enough to grab him. So yeah, let's keep an eye on this guy, and I will work on getting a hold of him and seeing if we can get him on this show, because he would be a great interview. Definitely lots of accolades for Antonio Gibson. Any other thoughts on Gibson before we move on?
Nothing without being in danger of going into full man crush mode, I'm afraid, Aldo. So I think we'll leave it there and move on.
All right. Well, are you in man crush mode with Jermichael Hasty, who had 3 rushes for 25 yards and a touchdown at the Senior Bowl game?
Jermichael Hasty is, you look at him, he looks a little bit like Devonta Freeman from the Falcons. Mm-hmm. So in terms of body type, he's like 5'9", round about that kind of height, well over 200 pounds, and built really solidly. So his pace was the thing that surprised me at the Senior Bowl, because he actually looked quicker at the Senior Bowl than he did on his tape at Baylor. So his ability to, again, sort of get to the line of scrimmage, to be able to jump, his jump cut, particularly laterally, he seems able to almost move like Tron, 2 yards laterally without you even seeing him move. His ability to sort of go up to the line of scrimmage, make people miss laterally, but not seem to lose his momentum going forward as well. Again, strong runner through contact. He gets up to the line of scrimmage very quickly. He runs with great balance. That coupled with the lateral agility means that in the zone system he's actually going to look really tasty, which is what we tend to run. So, that sort of zone, are we going that way? Which way are the defense going? Have we blocked it cleanly? There's a cutback lane. He's able to take advantage of that cutback lane. And again, he's someone who, in terms of ranking of most draft sites and most prognosticators, they sort of talk about him being undrafted. So, Jermichael Hasty for me is certainly draftable, probably 6th round, 5th round, that kind of range, potentially. If he drops to the 7th, that would be unreal value for me. He would certainly be worth picking up at that point. But like I say, again, he made the most of his opportunities when he was on the field, and that for me that's what you want to see out of any running back, is to make hay when the sun shines.
Absolutely. And he was asked to do just about everything over at Baylor by head coach Matt Rule, and it leads me to believe that he's a well-coached, comes out of college as a well-coached player. The few times that I saw him in pass protection mode from the running back position, I thought he was excellent. So that's a huge bonus if he can come into an NFL team and be ready to pass block, because that's something NFL coaches are always looking for from a young running back.
He does sort of look like he's got that short man syndrome, where he's just slightly angry and he's looking for an opportunity to hit somebody. Sometimes when he's in pass blocking, that does lead to him dropping his head a little bit, which is something which is correctable. But it might be a case of he's thinking he's got to hit harder than he necessarily does. What he needs to do is neutralise the momentum and maintain position. Sometimes he goes in like he wants to actually smash the bloke that's coming through free. Which, you got to love the attitude, but sometimes you need to be smart and just play it and stay in the hole and stay square and in front of your guy.
Absolutely. All right, let's move over to the guy who had the most rushing yards at the Senior Bowl, 105 yards on 15 carries. He had a long of 29 yards, and that's UCLA running back Joshua Kelly. Kelly was asked at the beginning of the week what he was hoping to showcase, and this was his response.
I'm just trying to showcase my true third down ability, whether that's just being versatile in the pass game, whether that's catching out the backfield, blocking. I want to show my versatility in third down.
I think he was successful in showing his versatility. What do you think, Bearlissimo?
Yeah, I think understatement of the week. The guy, I mean, first down and second down didn't look too bad either. To be honest, he was absolutely flying out there. And like I say, in terms of the blocking, wasn't always perfect in front of him, but he was able to find a crease, and he was so fast through it. I mean, he definitely looked like the fastest running back out of all of the ones that were there. Potentially him or Antonio Gibson. I would love to see in a foot race between the two, because they both look like lightning in a bottle to me. For me, I think with that performance, with the Bengals seeing him, with Detroit Lions seeing him, and both having needs sort of running back to fill their stable, there's a chance that he will be gone by the end of the fourth round, assuming that we get a compensation pick at the end of the fourth. So again, he might be sort of too rich for our blood. But if he does go ahead of when we're looking to pick, that means one of these other guys is going to drop to a position where we'll be able to pick them up. Again, his ability to catch, his ability to turn and get upfield in a hurry is fantastic. He does a nice little stutter setting up block. So when you're going up to a tackler, very often one of the good tactics you can employ is to put in a couple of stutter steps just before you get to them, which means that they're either going to set their feet, in which case you can run around them, or they're not going to set their feet and you can literally put your head in the middle of their chest and run through them. And he does a very good job of not only doing that to set up the defender, but also taking the right option when it presents itself in front of him. For me, he was the offensive MVP of the game, but he didn't. I know he didn't receive that honor, did he?
No, he did not. I'm totally with you. I think that of all the players, this guy may have done more than anyone else to improve his draft stock. There's sometimes a lot of scouts don't actually make the trip out west. A lot of Midwest scouts don't make, or not scouts, but because obviously there are regional scouts out there, but GMs don't make the trips out west to see players firsthand. And so I've got a feeling that this showcase at the Senior Bowl, where everyone was able to see him up close and personal during the practice week, that he just did so much to prove to people that he is worthy of a day 2 draft selection. I really do think he made a major leap on draft boards.
I think you're right, and I think some of the times that it seems that the NFL seems to look at the Pac-12, and college pundits as well seem to look at the Pac-12 and think, well, they don't really play defense over there, so the stats are always inflated. Obviously, you see that propensity with sort of Washington State, USC, UCLA, all of those teams over that West Coast. You seem to see high offensive production, but not very much in terms of the way of defense. So it's always, a bit of a shootout, which tends to mean that sometimes stats can be slightly inflated and people discount him. But he showed that that's genuine. I mean, he showed that the stats that he was getting over there were legitimate. He looked like a real classy running back, a very sort of glidey type runner. I don't know if many people would remember Eric Dickerson, the way he ran, or Roger Craig.
Yeah.
But he looked sort of very effortless in his ability to pick up and maintain pace and looking really quick as well.
Yeah. All right, let's turn our attention now to wide receivers. The first one on our list is the kid from Baylor, Denzel Mims. He only had one catch for 13 yards in the game, and he missed on a really long, could have been a 40, 50-yard touchdown pass that he seemed to lose in the sunlight. But nonetheless, this guy did so much during the week. He's such a huge receiver with excellent speed. He did a lot to impress scouts throughout the week. What did your eyes tell you about Denzel Mims?
I've loved him for a long time in this process, in terms of we need a sort of a go up and get it, really threaten the defense in the sort of the downfield areas to take the top off the defense. We've needed a player of that type to go with Adam Robinson. If you imagine Taylor Gabriel's type speed, but in someone who's 6'2", 6'3", and agile, that's what you're going to get with Denzel Mims. He's really shifty as well. At Baylor, he caught a lot of quick screens, bubbles, slants, and turned those into very long runs. You're quite right. That deep ball that he missed on, he sort of continued his angle that he was on, that Jordan Love sort of threw it a little bit flatter and more towards the centre of the field, which was open. So it was a decent throw. I think he lost it in the sunlight, because if you look at the shadows on the field on that particular throw, you will see that sunlight would have been high and sort of behind him. So it's a strong possibility he actually just lost the ball in the sunlight there. One running back we didn't mention though, which we did in the previous show. Darius Anderson, TCU.
My apologies. I looked. I went right past him on my list here. Please go ahead and talk about him.
Yeah, we discussed him at length on episode 2 of Bearlissimo, but he again showed up. What was it? A 70-something yard swing route for a touchdown.
Exactly, from Shea Patterson. Yes.
Yeah, and the ball was behind him slightly on that pass as well. So, I mean, he took that sort of... Yes, he did step out of the one technically, but we're going to give him that touchdown. I mean, certainly the refs did, so that's fine. But, again, his ability to adjust to the ball in the passing game, perfect for what we need him to do. But, again, when he had opportunities to run up the middle, he doesn't shy away from it. So, for me, Darius Anderson is a more complementary Tariq Cohen type. So someone who can come out of the backfield, run legitimate routes, very good hands, not just average or decent, very good hands, an ability to sort of adjust to the ball, and a real threat to go the distance every time you get him in space. So I thought he presented well. But back to Denzel Mims. His body control, I know Danny, when I spoke to Danny about him, he said that his hands were inconsistent. I didn't really see that. I didn't really see him double catching balls in practices, although I'm sure there were some occasions where you would have seen that. Mm-hmm. But for me, he can run by you. I mean, he's a 10.2 second 100-meter runner when he was 16 years old in high school. The guy is rapid. But he's got really good body control as well for someone of that height and speed. He's able to twist and contort his body to be able to adjust the ball in the air. And like I say, his hands in the majority are very, very good. He does have the occasional double catch when he's trying to run before he's caught the ball. But for me, he's someone who, for what we're looking for, take the top off the defence, get him sort of running, those goes, those post corners, all those type of routes, taking the top off the defence. He's absolutely perfect for what we need. Again, another Bear that I would love to become a Bear in the future.
Yeah. Greg Braggs is in the chat room, and he says in this offense, what the Bears' needs right now, what do you think is more important to get? A guy who can go up and get the ball, or a speedster, somebody who can stretch the field?
Why not both with Denzel Mims? Yeah. And what's up, Thunder Buddy? Yeah, Greg Braggs, obviously, when we met in London, was my roomie. But good to see you listening in, Greg. Yeah, I mean, for me, Denzel Mims is both of those things. So you don't necessarily need to have a rocket, Rajib Ismail sort of Smurf speedster.
Yes,
you can get guys who give you a bit of both, and Denzel Mims does that in spades. There were a couple of other receivers at the Senior Bowl that also impressed me in that capacity as well. But I'm sure we'll come on to those.
Well, is KJ Hill one of them?
It's like you're reading my mind, Aldo. he absolutely is. I mean, he showed some real juice and punt return in the Senior Bowl as well, so he gives you a plus as a punt returner. But all week, his routes were highly sophisticated. Certainly the best route runner, bar none, in the Senior Bowl in terms of all the receivers. Certainly that I saw in the one-on-ones and that work. Didn't really get an opportunity to show it in the game, though, sadly, largely because his quarterbacks were lying on their back, being sacked by Anae Uche. But like I say, I mean, very sophisticated route runner, excellent hands, very quick, lacks a little bit of size or length, but at the end of the day, if you want a guy who runs really precise routes, gets to the point that he needs to be at, and is sophisticated enough to be able to deviate from his route, but have the pace to get back onto it, he showed that in abundance, certainly in terms of his performance in the practices at the Senior Bowl. Not so much in the game, but like I say, that was not down to his efforts, certainly.
Absolutely. He was very impressive all week long, and as you said, he really didn't get the opportunity to do much during the game. He had one pass thrown at him, which he caught for only a yard. But we got a chance to ask him what was the biggest thing he wanted to prove when we saw him earlier in the week, and this was his response.
I feel like scouts know I can play. They watch film all the time. They see me play. They know I can catch. They know I can run routes. I just want them to know what type of guy I am. On film, you don't know who I am as a person. I want them to know that I'm a competitor. I don't like losing, and I'm a winner.
And that is the biggest thing that most players can prove to scouts, is that they are good guys, that their character is worth drafting, because the majority of the scouting comes from the tape during their college football seasons. You can only get so much information from practices and from an all-star game. The biggest benefit, I think, for all scouts is, talking to these guys face-to-face, asking them tough questions, getting to know them as people, and so that was a good response there by KJ Hill. Anything else you want to add about the young wide receiver?
Yeah, that was post-game, Aldo, that interview. Game.
Oh, no, it was prior to the game. It was earlier in the week.
Okay, because, the one thing that he again, that game for him as a wide receiver, he's got the opportunity to really show what he can do, and he didn't get the opportunity during the game. Not once did you see his head drop. Not once did you see him turn and look at the quarterback and throw his hands up. Not once did you see him sort of get down. Every time he had an opportunity, he was doing his job. And for me, that shows a lot of maturity that on the field, you might not see him in an interview, and he might interview very well, which it sounds like he does. He sounds articulate, bright.
Yes.
But on the field as well, his demeanour, he showed it in that sort of those non-verbal skills. So, being able to keep his demeanour the same, flat response, no matter how well he does in punt return, trying to egg on and gee up his teammates, but also being that positive when he wasn't getting the ball. So that was the thing that impressed me as well in the Senior Bowl in terms of what he did.
What impressed you or did not impress you about Van Jefferson, another wide receiver?
Again, very refined route running. I was surprised actually at his route running in practices. He can play either wide or in the slot, and in fact was very efficient from the slot during the game. He's certainly fast enough and has reliable hands. He had a better week of practice, but largely that's because the quarterbacks, like I say, with the game as well, they weren't on their back. They were able to actually stand there and throw it on air, which didn't happen very much in the game. But Van Jefferson was very impressive in terms of his route running ability and making the most of the opportunities that presented himself. But he's another guy that isn't necessarily a 1 or a 2, but he's a guy that he could play on the outside or he could play from the slot. You could move him around in the formation, so he would offer scheme flexibility. And he offers a little bit of size as well.
Yeah, 6'2", about 200 pounds, so he definitely has some size. Although he does have a thin frame for wide receiver, so he needs to add some more muscle.
Yeah, I'm sure once he gets to Chicago and starts eating some chili beef and stuff like that, he'll be all right.
That is right. Let's jump over to Benjamin Victor. He had no stats in the game. By the way, Van Jefferson caught two catches for 11 yards in the Senior Bowl. Victor had no stats. What'd you see from the practice tape?
Yeah, from the practice tape, I saw a guy who is Ohio, isn't it? He's at was a bit of a bit part guy at his college, but what I saw from him again was speed, length, size, precise route running, knowing where he's got to go, knowing the leverage, knowing what he's got to do to set up the defensive back, and the ability to physically go up and get the ball. That's what I saw from him in practice. He's fast, he's tall, he's got good hands. He's a poor man's Denzel Mims for me. So if we can't get Denzel Mims, Benjamin Victor would be a nice consolation to get sort of later on in the draft. Certainly he's not rated that high in terms of most of the sites that are ranking wide receivers at the moment. For example, the Draft Network have got him rated really low down, 188th. So that would be sort of 6th, 7th round kind of range. Mm-hmm. So again, if you can get him in the 6th or 7th round, he would be huge value, because like I say, he's got the legitimate speed to be able to take the top off of a defense and the ability to go up and get it and catch it and body people as well. So he has a lot of upside that he maybe didn't show in college. Will probably be a better NFL player than he was in a collegiate.
6'4", so he definitely has that height to go up and get it. So he really didn't stand out much for me. Not to say that he didn't have a good practice. I just my eyes just never really caught on to his play. So definitely, you studied the tape, so it's good to get your perspective there. I appreciate that. Let's move over to the tight ends. Everybody was talking about Brycen Hopkins. He caught 2 passes for 19 yards, and earlier in the week, he was asked, "What are you hoping to prove?"
You know, I'm just out here trying to show some physicality. You know, I was one of the lighter tight ends at 241. That was okay. And then I can still gain weight on that fact. But as long as I'm in there, sticking my head in there, showing that I have sound technique and that I can improve in the next level, I think that's what I'm here to do. And I've tried to do that, and I have.
He impressed a lot of people down in Mobile, like he did his entire season at Mobile. What are your thoughts on Hopkins?
Well, as the founder member of the Bryson Hopkins Appreciation Society, he for me in the game, he was one of the few blockers that actually managed to stand in front of Uche and actually keep him off the quarterback.
Yeah.
He certainly performed better than the offensive tackles did in that regard. So his ability, if you need him to stay in the formation and to pass block, he's got the ability to set his feet and get square and to be able to shuffle and keep his feet nice and low, keep his hips low and his chest up and his arms out in front of him. Really nice pass blocking technique. But he also showed a bit of juice in terms of there was a couple of times there was a run, I think it was a reverse actually, Denzel Mims, and he was the blocker that came across the formation. You know that JP Holtz formation where he comes across and tries to run a wham. Well, that's what Bryson Hopkins actually did on that play, but he actually managed to get out in front of, I think it was an A.
Yes.
And he managed to kick an A out for the Denzel Mims to scoot outside him because he was off balance. He scooted outside him and sort of got 15, 16 yards on a reverse. So again, we already know that he's an excellent, and I do mean excellent, route runner for a tight end. He shows a sophistication in his ability to run routes. Sometimes when people get a little bit grabby, he struggles to separate. So that upper body strength is something that, that's if he's got one area to work on, that's probably it. But for me, his ability to run routes, to separate, certainly in man, and again in zone, he's able to see it settle where he needs to settle and sort of turn his body. And he showed a little bit of savvy with that regard, particularly. I don't know if you saw it in the 2-minute drill of the first half.
Yes.
He saw the linebackers bail really early. Mm-hmm. And all he did was he just went sort of 4 yards off the line of scrimmage, turned around straight away, ball straight at him. I think it was Shea Patterson. I think it might have been throwing it to him. But he picked up the ball and got a first down.
Yes.
To keep it moving. So again, we need guys who can block, who can run routes, who can give a real legitimate threat, who can get that sort of, the Travis Kelce sort of 3-4 yards of separation. And he, for me, is the best at being able to do that. In terms of what they did in the game, they used him in line, they used him as a move tight end, they split him as a wideout, and they used him at fullback. Does that sound appealing to you, Aldo?
Yes, it does. And this guy is going to be a matchup nightmare in the NFL. 6'5", 245 pounds, and with the skill set that he has, he'd be a very interesting piece for the Chicago Bears, who are in dire need of a tight end with those kinds of skills. Anything else you want to add about Hopkins? Because this guy is going to be a big topic of discussion, I think, over the next 2-3 months prior to the draft. This guy is got Chicago Bear written all over him as a second-round pick, in my opinion. I
would love him to be there, but sadly, I think he's probably got New England Patriots written on him in the first round.
Oh, interesting.
23 to 24, round about that kind of range. I think the Patriots are going to take a look at him in a major way. Do you like him more than Notre Dame's Cole Kmet? Absolutely. Kmet, for me, he's got the name, and he's got, in terms of, there's a lot of buzz around him as a tight end, but for me, he's probably not even my third favourite tight end. For me, he's a little bit Kmet rather than Kmet. I don't want to disparage, because I'm sure he's probably about 6 inches taller than me and probably sort of around about the same sort of weight, and could probably kick my ass because I'm an old man now. But for me, he blocks. He's probably one of the better blockers, but I mean, being functional is what we need, and he really didn't sort of excel himself that much more than what I've seen from certainly the other tight ends that were at the Senior Bowl. I thought, as a group, they were one of the best performing groups overall in practices and in the game. I was very surprised at how well the tight end groups as a whole did. But Kmet is not someone that, as a Golden Domer, he's not someone I'm particularly that fussed by. I don't see anything that sort of says he's a second rounder for me. Well, you mentioned
the tight end group as a whole. And one of the guys that was getting a lot of attention and increased as the week went on because of his excellent practices was Adam Troutman from little-known Dayton University. And he was asked about his blocking and that he said that he takes a lot of pride in blocking. And this is what he shared with us.
100%, yeah. It comes from the mindset we set at Dayton as well, coupled with my own. But yeah, snap to whistle guy, like you have to be show the willingness to do it. You can always get way better at your technique and all that kind of stuff, but you have to be willing to stick your face in there and get dirty with guys. Like just be a presence on the line of scrimmage as well in the air.
He impressed a lot of people, not only with his play, but during his interviews. And this guy came to Dayton as a quarterback and switched over to tight end. And you could tell that he's got that kind of quarterback sensibility in his route running and knowing what to do. He's got a lot of skills. If anything that Bears fans won't like about him is that he comes from a small school a la Adam Shaheen. What are your thoughts on Troutman?
They need to get past the fact that his first name is Adam, and he comes from a small school.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm not able to get a lot of Dayton tape.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
I stress Dayton, not dating. Although, to be honest, at the Senior Bowl, he was just super impressive. Like you say, for a small school kid, you couldn't tell. I mean, he could have been, an LSU player, an Ohio State player. He could have been any of the top schools, Clemson, you name it. He could have been. You wouldn't have been surprised if he'd have had any of those helmets on, because he just didn't look out of place at all. He was quick. He was compact built. Although he's not short, he just looked very muscular and physical. He looked like everything that Ryan Pace thought he was going to get with Adam Shaheen, to be honest. The kid was very willing and surprisingly effective blocker. Very, very quick release off the line, which was very pleasing to see. He ran crisp routes, but there wasn't a lot of sophistication in his route running. Mm-hmm. So in other words, he was running it as it's drawn, not necessarily running against the leverage of where the defensive back or linebacker is. Sometimes when you're running routes, particularly as a tight end, you need to understand where your coverage is coming from, whether it's a zone, whether it's a man scheme, and you need to understand where their leverage is and where they're trying to take away from you, and you need to work against them. So basically, you've got to set them up in a position of deficit straight away by running almost the wrong way. Once they adjust, that's when you cut back to the side that you actually want to be on. There was less of that in his route running for me. So yes, he is athletically good. He's a good blocker. He's very quick. He's got good hands. He didn't look out of place at all, but he does need to work on his route running. If he had Bryson Hopkins' route running abilities, he'd be first round worthy. He'd certainly be in the same conversation as Bryson Hopkins as being one of the top three tight ends in this draft. There's a Hunter Bryant as well, who I think is a junior out of Washington, but he's actually sort of built more like a wide receiver than he is a tight end, and he plays like one as well in terms of his ability to separate and get downfield, but he's not someone we've yet covered. Hunter Bryant, not Harrison, obviously, the FAU guy. So yeah, I mean, Adam Troutman was just super impressive, really, given where he's come from and the jump up in level that he was seeing in terms of the linebackers he was against, the safeties he was against, much higher level than anything he would have seen, other than obviously the other safety that was there that was from a small school as well, Lenoir Ryan safety, but we'll get onto him when we get onto defensive backs. Right. But Adam Troutman, very impressive.
And you mentioned Harrison Bryant from FAU. He's the next guy on my list. And while he did not catch a pass at the Senior Bowl, he did lead all Division I tight ends with 65 catches, 1,004 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. What impressed you about Bryant?
His blocking was very impressive. Again, he's a guy that sort of one-on-one can legitimately man up against the defensive end and either maintain position or get them actually off the line of scrimmage. When they were running, they ran a lot of zone when they were running. So when he's slanting down on a defensive end from the tight end position, he was getting some real serious shove. And a couple of times he actually pancaked guys. So I mean, if you go back and watch the Senior Bowl, you'll see that. Like I say, I mean, he probably struggled against a 3-4 defensive end. You put him up against an Akeem Hicks, he's going to get ragdolled. But you expect that for any tight end. But against the 4-3 defensive end, he's going to get his share of wins. which for me, he's one of those guys, Harrison Bryant. You look at him, you think, yeah, he doesn't look that athletic, he doesn't look that fast, he doesn't look that impressive in any one thing, but he just does everything well. And that for me, not flashy, just good, which I'm happy to take, 7 days a week and 8 days on a Sunday.
All right, let's move on now and talk about Jared Pinkney. I know Danny Shimon had a man crush on Pinkney all week long, and Brian Perez, a friend of Bears Barroom and the NBC Sports Chicago reporter, has him ranked as somebody who could go, in late in the first round and as low as the third or fourth round. That's the kind of word that he's hearing about Pinkney. Tell me what you thought about his practice tape.
So his practice tape was better than his performance in games. He's not as fast as Hopkins or Troutman. He's not as refined a player all round as Bryant. He runs really well against zone coverages, but he doesn't separate in any way, shape or form against man. So he is limited in terms of how you can use him in the passing. He's probably got, where you got a size advantage, he's strong enough to be able to hold off the defender and have contested catches. But when he's in man, they will be contested catches because he struggles to separate in that way. So for me, he's a slightly lower round than the other guys we've already mentioned. But what I do like about him is once he's got the ball in his hands, he's an angry man, which I'm all for offensive players who are offensive in their attitude. So when you're a tight end and you catch the ball and you're along all those fast, small defensive backs, you're looking for someone to punish, and that's what you're going to get from Jared Pinkney. He's going to catch the ball, he's going to turn upfield, it's going to be very north-south, and he's going to run over people and possibly wear down some of those safeties when they've going to be asked to cover in the deep half or centre field position. If he gets on them early, they're going to be battered and bruised by the time that they're coming to try and tackle anybody else.
All right, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but for me, like I say, he actually dropped slightly further down my expectations on the day. For me, he's a later round guy now, like a sort of a fifth, sixth round that kind of area.
Yeah, no argument from me there. What about your thoughts on Josiah? Let me see if I can get this last name pronounced correctly.
DeGuara.
DeGuara, yeah, that's it. University of Cincinnati. What are your thoughts on him?
So, a real athlete, but more of a sort of a move tight end. He knows he's supposed to block. He's got a good idea that he's supposed to do something, but he's kind of wild and out of control when he actually does it. His hands are all over the place. But that said, as a receiving threat, he's very, very good. And when he's asked to block in space, he does a good job of position blocking. He's not going to move anyone off the line of scrimmage for me, and he's not going to be able to sort of take on defensive linemen on a one-on-one. He'll be able to work two-on-ones and then release and get down to second level when it's a zone scheme. So that's what he's able to do. But for me, he's a late round stroke UDFA kind of guy, but offers some upside as a receiver, and certainly once he's had a year, on a practice squad or whatever, he'll have that functional strength and a bit more of an idea about blocking that could see him, contribute certainly on special teams and places like that with his pace, and also sort of as an option to receive the ball downfield as well.
All right, one guy that was not at the Senior Bowl but impressed you with his play at the East-West Shrine game was tight end Eli Wolf, 6'4", 236 pounds. Tell me what you like about him.
He looked a lot like Troutman, to be honest. Yes, it's a lesser level of competition, but he was very similar to Troutman in the way he played at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Not someone I've seen a lot of out of Georgia, but we love our Georgia boys in terms of Chicago Bears. We can't get enough of drafting those guys. But Eli Wolf was someone that wasn't really on my radar. I hadn't really looked. He's slated as being undrafted. Most boards don't even have him on it. But he showed really well at the East-West Bowl. That he's a legitimate receiving threat. He's got real pace to certainly threaten most linebackers and very many safeties, and really solid hands and just getting upfield. But he showed a willingness to block and a bit of nastiness at it as well, which, again, my tight ends, I don't want them just to sort of dance and jump up and down on the sideline when they're supposed to be catching the ball and getting the feet down. Trey Burton. I want guys who are going to catch the ball and then punish people. And he showed that whether he's catching or whether he's blocking, he's going to use his physicality to try and move people and make a contribution to the running game and passing game. So it's quite impressive. The East West Shrine Bowl, if those people that can be bothered to go and have a look, I suggest that they do, because he shows up early and often.
Yeah, indeed. Now, he has not been invited to the NFL Combine as far as I know, and let's hope that changes, because I'd like to see him at the Combine and see if he's added some more weight, because at 236 pounds and at the tight end position, he'll need to add some more muscle. All right, let's turn our attention over to offensive tackles. The first one on my list is Josh Jones. He got a lot of attention down in Mobile. What'd you see out of Jones?
In the one-on-one drills, his footwork was better than I'd ever seen it at Houston on tape. The thing with Houston, when he was on tape there was a tendency for him to get too aggressive and slightly get over his feet. So his body weight was sort of slightly too far forward, and he was prone to push pulls. So sometimes he was on the ground against savvy defensive ends who would feel him him having a win, and then they would literally pull him and get him off his feet and walk around him. He didn't show any of that at the Senior Bowl. His ability to stay square and in front of the defender, his footwork was great. Nice and low feet in his kick slide, nice wide base, but able to sort of shift, keep his bottom down, his chest up, and his hands out in front of him. But he showed a nastiness and a physicality that you really want to see at either left or right tackle. So whether you want to drop him into a system where he wouldn't necessarily be left tackle day one, you can do that legitimately with him. But equally, he would be an instant starter at left tackle for us if we were lucky enough to draft him. He may have well got himself into the middle of the first round with his performance.
Yeah, I was unable to get an interview with him because he always had a crowd around him, and I couldn't get good quality audio, but I did read a quote from him from the PalmBeachPost.com. He was asked what his strength is, and he immediately said, pass blocking. I just get the job done. This year, I let up 4 pressures and a half a sack. I am dominant at it. I take pride in it. If I give up a pressure even close to a sack, I'm kicking myself in the butt. It's just a source of pride. Boy, oh boy, that is the type of attitude you want out of your offensive lineman. Sounds a lot like Kyle Long, huh?
Yeah, you have to love that attitude. Someone who just wants to not only dominate the player in front of them, they want to eviscerate them. And for me, hearing that kind of thing is as an ex-offensive line coach, that's music to my ears.
How about it? One guy I was able to talk to is Matthew Pert, and I asked him, the offensive tackle with really long arms. I think he may have had the longest arms at the combine. I asked him to do a self-scouting, and this is what he said.
I feel like my athletic ability is very strong. I really feel like I have really good footwork and stuff like that. Something obviously working forward, need to work on moving forward, just being an overall student of the game. Understand as you rise the level, you just gotta dedicate more time and sacrifice more time into studying football and understanding scheming better and all that type of thing.
He says he needs to be a better student of the game, and I think that was kind of evident in his practice tape. Did you see the same thing I saw?
To be honest, I didn't. I mean, in the game, Connecticut obviously is playing a lesser level of player, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. But Pert was played right tackle exclusively, I believe, at the Senior Bowl,
right?
And he did a really good job at that. I actually thought he was quite good in practices during the week. You know how Nagy loves a good practice, and he was one that certainly did that. But he carried it over into the game. How many times did you see the North defensive ends get called when he was on the field? It was him and Jones that were the tackles when they excelled. So for me, you didn't really see any pressures. You didn't really see any inside counters. You didn't see people dipping and ripping on the outside. He just had win after win after win. I thought he actually had a really good Senior Bowl. He had a good day run blocking too, particularly against straight power, one-on-one power scheme, or whether it was in the zone blocking scheme. He had a couple of times where he missed in zone blocking. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I think he needs to work on. Mm-hmm. But certainly in terms of power scheme, he's more of a power scheme blocker, although I know Shane believes that he doesn't have the sort of the physicality, the nastiness to do that. He showed, I thought, actually in the Senior Bowl, when you watch the tape, he showed quite well in one-on-one blocking. like I say, it was when the zone blocking where he's asked to exchange and sort of kiss and then go on to the second level. That's where it looked like he had some uncertainty, and that might be the fact that he's not used to playing with the guys that are alongside him. But he did do well. Like I say, I mean, in terms of taking a goal one-on-one in pass blocking, no issues at all. He just did really well.
Yeah, okay. Next on the list here is Hakeem Adeniji. I believe I got that name correct. I really didn't pick up much information on Hakeem. What do you got on him?
Hakeem Adeniji, yeah. Kansas. He played tackle at Kansas, and he might be a player that sort of gets moved inside. He was moved inside at the Senior Bowl, but I think that was because he was on the field again almost exclusively with Josh Jones at left tackle and Matt Pert at right tackle. He was the guard inside on those plays. He didn't really do that well at guard for me. It looks like it's not a natural position for him. So whereas you might have concerns over his arm length, his footwork is really good and his hand usage is good when he's playing tackle. So all I can really go off is the tape at Kansas that that he played at, and he did very well. And he did well actually in the game when he was in space, which for a larger, heavier guy, which Adeniji is, and he plays with a nasty demeanour as well. He loves to punish people. He did well in space as well, which was encouraging. That's what I've got on him. At guard, he was too upright. He didn't really sink his hips low enough. It looked like his footwork wasn't clean as well. So in pass blocking, he sort of struggled a little bit. In terms of run blocking, that's where he was able to sort of keep his pad level low and drive, and he did some good things in run blocking.
Alex Taylor, you mentioned him earlier. He came in and he measured in at 6'8" and an eighth, 308 pounds. He looked really lean. Had 11-inch hands, huge hands, and he probably had the largest wingspan at 88 inches. One of the things that he was asked about was the fact that he played against while he played at a small school, South Carolina State, the defensive line there was considered one of the best in the nation, and he was asked what it was like going up against them in practice.
Our D-line was probably one of the best D-lines, if not the best D-line in the MEAC. So you know what I'm saying? We had a lot of stout guys up there, and it was just like in practice, we would go at it back and forth. They coming at us, we coming at them, just iron sharpen iron. But it was a crazy development process. Like I said, when I first got in from basketball, just them guys were already there for a little while, just going at it. So they saw me come in, and it was just like, okay, big guy, you know what I'm saying? You can do good. So they just kept coming at me, and it was just a battle every day at practice. You know what I'm saying?
And that audio is courtesy of Emory Hunt's football game plan that you can find on his YouTube channel. What are your thoughts on Taylor?
Yeah, so South Carolina State, I think, had 2 defensive tackles drafted last year, if I remember right. They do have a decent defensive line. I was super impressed with someone who's, again, he's listed as being, but again, by most outlets, they have him as undrafted. The Draft Network have him as 329th, which would be undrafted. But in the Senior Bowl, when he stuck to his fundamentals, when he kept working, he did really, really well. Again, he was up against a couple of times Uche, who was by far the most impressive edge defender, even more so than Ane for me, in terms of what we need. Uche is it, as far as I'm concerned. But he had a bit of a rough start. His very first snap was a false start, but he didn't sort of let that knock him. He's the tallest, the biggest wingspan, the longest arm, and the biggest hands at the Senior Bowl. But he's also very, very quick and athletic. His feet, he talked about basketball there. It shows with his footwork. His ability to mirror and to move his feet quickly in short spaces and not get pushed back with just the fact that he's just a massive human, 6 foot, nearly 6'9". He looks like a power forward. And in terms of his footwork, he plays like one as well. He's got decent bend for someone of that length. The one thing that he did a couple of times, just got lazy with his hands. So, yes, you've got that length. It doesn't mean just put your hands on them and be content with that. When you're an offensive lineman, you've got to punch, reset, punch, reset, punch, reset. Constantly keep the defensive end or the blitzing linebacker, constantly keep them thinking and working and adjusting to what it is that you're doing. And that's where you've got your length, is when you punch and you reset your hands, you give yourself a bit more space to see what they're doing next and adjust your feet. And the times where he struggled was where he just put his massive long levers out in front of him and they were just swatting them down and going around him. It just shows that someone that's not played offensive tackle for very long. But in terms of upside, huge upside. So a guy that you can look at as a 7th round or priority free agent, he might well have got himself into sort of 6th round consideration round about that kind of level for someone who looks at him and thinks, yeah, we can work with this. They might take a flyer on him a little bit earlier than anyone would think. But for me, he actually performed probably the 3rd best offensive tackle at the Senior Bowl. Yeah, he had some shaky moments. Like I say, his hand usage is where he needs to clean up his technique, and he needs to get more sort of a bit more active with his hands.
Yeah, lots of commentary in the chat room about the poor offensive tackle play at the Senior Bowl. And it really was much better during practice week, but come game time, it was really, really bad. Just ask Jalen Hurts about that.
I felt so sorry for the guy. I mean, at the end of the day, he was coming in sort of with the most to prove at quarterback out of all the quarterbacks that were there. Former Alabama, gone to, done really well at Oklahoma, etc. Ohio. Yeah, Oklahoma. But he had nothing. He had literally the only guys. I think he had a couple of series with Cushenberry and the Damian Lewis, the LSU center and guard combination. But that is literally all he had on the offensive line. The other 3 were just turnstiles. So he really struggled, and I'm not surprised. Again, my concerns with Jalen Hurts coming in, I know we're not talking about quarterbacks, but my concerns with him was the ability to read a defense under pressure and to be able to stay and be able to pass from the pocket. He wasn't able to do that. And even when he escaped the pocket, he was late on reads and late on throwing.
Yeah, he had a tough week. His grandfather was buried on Wednesday, so it was a difficult week for him. And so I'm not making excuses for his performance during the week, and I think that your evaluation also is taken into account his play at Oklahoma during the senior year and what you saw out of him at Alabama. But we'll talk more about Jalen Hurts in future shows, because I've got some contrary thoughts. I might be a little bit higher on Jalen than you are, but you're the expert here, so I will forewarn all our listeners about my opinion.
It's all good. It's perspective. You were nailed on with Mahomes, so you've already got a win under your belt.
Yeah, that's just one, unfortunately. All right, let's go to the interior of the offensive line and talk about Lloyd Cushenberry III, the LSU guard center. And this guy is a special player in my book. And earlier in the week, he was asked, what is it that he's telling NFL scouts during this interview process? And this is what he said.
Coming into college, I was a late signee, last guy. Not really many people knew about me. I stayed patient, worked hard, and became 18 and at a great number 18 at LSU, which is a great honor. And now I'm here, ready for my opportunity. I feel like I'm a hard worker that's going to do things the right way on and off the field. So, just like I've been telling any team, if you decide to draft me, man, you won't regret it.
You decide to draft me, you won't regret it. What are your thoughts on Cushenberry?
I want you to sit calmly and still, Aldo, because I know we're talking about interior offensive linemen, and you do tend to get a little bit frothy.
Yes, that is true.
But it's understandable when it comes to both of the LSU interior guys that were there at the Senior Bowl this weekend. Cushenberry is a guy who is athletic to be able to pull, to be able to get out in front, and he's strong enough to be able to take on a nose. He can, certainly in terms of his ability to call, there were a couple of times where he sort of was beaten by lateral movement. So guys sort of coming across his face a couple of times. But again, I think that I'm probably going to chalk that down to him not necessarily knowing the guard that's on the other side of him. So yes, he knew what he had with Damian Lewis to his right, but he didn't necessarily know what he had to his left. And most of the day, it was basically a garbage pan or a blocking dummy. That was basically what he had working next to him most of the game, to his left-hand side. But in terms of as a centre, he's probably the top or second, potentially, if you like Tyler Biadasz or Badass, or I'm not sure how you say his name, Tyler B. Mm-hmm. He and Cushenberry are the two best centres for me in the draft. And he certainly played like it at the Senior Bowl, did really well.
Excellent. All right. You mentioned the Damian Lewis earlier from LSU. He was a late add to the Senior Bowl. Your thoughts on him?
He's a bad man. I tell you what, you were talking about Quentin Nelson and that sort of that nastiness and that ability to just drive people and not only drive them up and back, but drive them onto the backs and then drive them into the floor and then drive them a little bit more into the floor just to demoralise them. We saw that several times at the Senior Bowl. He was super impressive working doubles in terms of being able to switch off with Cushenberry and then get down to the linebacker level. So he's able to run the sort of the zone system, and certainly in terms of power, he's got a great base, massive legs and sort of behind, keeps his hips nice and low, keeps his chest up, really strong arms, slightly shorter arm length it looks like to me from what I see on tape. So it'd be interesting to see how his measurements were at the Senior Bowl and what they look like at the NFL Combine. But in terms of bench press, he's probably going to be one of the top bench pressers, I'd imagine, because he's got huge arms. And he shows a lot of functional strength as well in terms of being able to translate that into drive blocking and also being, pretty sound fundamentally in terms of the LSU offensive line last year were largely responsible as an offense. Them coupled with Burrow and those wide receivers, that's the reason why they excelled, because their offensive tackle, center and guards were outstanding, and that showed in the Senior Bowl. Damian Lewis wasn't someone who was necessarily on my radar before the Senior Bowl, but by Jesus, is he on it now? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, Aldo, but super impressed by him. Just a nasty guy, and that's what I love.
Yeah, he considers himself a mauler, particularly in the run game, and he was asked, what position preference he has. He says, if it's not center, I'll play guard. I'll play left guard. I'll play right guard. I'll play wherever you need me. Just put me in there, and I'll start mauling people. So he's got a great killer instinct. I was impressed by his play. You want to talk a little bit about Ben Bredesen of Michigan? I know you're not really high on him, but I wanted to get your thoughts on him, particularly because he told us that he worked with, now I got a brain fart, new offensive line coach for the Chicago Bears is
Castillo.
He worked with Juan Castillo at Michigan. What are your thoughts on Ben?
Okay, so on the tape at Michigan, he looked really strong and a real mauler. Him and, in fact, both of the guards at Michigan who are in this draft, both look like earth movers. But the one thing that showed up, in terms of run blocking, excellent run blocker, really good, really powerful, very, 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 very strong. Once he locks onto someone's pads in their chest, it's over. He will just drive people into the floor, and he can literally pick people up and throw them. He's got that kind of functional strength when it comes to drive blocking. So drive blocking, no issue whatsoever. But his short arms, that measured very short as well, really shows up in pass protection. Mm-hmm. He struggles to get under the pads, and as such, he's always trying to react. And his footwork isn't sudden enough and quick enough to be able to mirror successfully the issues. He can't make up for his short arms with his feet, basically. So I think, based upon his pass protection and the limitations that showed up in the Senior Bowl against what was a very good defensive line on both squads, I thought they, again, as a group, they excelled the defensive line. But he really showed his limitations in pass blocking, and that for me is going to drop him down. Certainly, if it was my draft board, he'd be dropped down at least a round, if not possibly two.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's move on now to the other guard from Michigan, Michael Onwenu, I believe is how it's pronounced. Giant guard. I got him down here at 6'2.5", 362 pounds. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, 362 pounds. Probably 162 pounds of that is arm. The guy is a monster, and he plays like it. So, I mean, slightly shorter arms, or he plays like he's got short arms, but his footwork was actually probably slightly better, which is odd at right guard, certainly over left guard. Right. But his footwork was probably better. I think he was at the East-West Bowl, and he did well there. It certainly didn't look out of place, was driving guys off line of scrimmage, didn't give up any pressures at all. Certainly, he's not the kind of guy that people are going to win in a bull rush against, because his base and his anchor is so good, and literally he's just his physical mass is such that he's not going to get bullied by pretty much anyone. What he might be susceptible to is, and again thinking about our division, is the Kenny Clarks of the world or the Aaron Donalds. So yeah, we are talking about the top echelon of defensive tackles, but guys who are very sudden at moving across the face of a guard, those are the guys he's going to struggle against, I think, at the next level. But for most other people, he's just a dominant run blocker and more than sufficiently functional pass blocker as well. I like him now better than Bredesen.
We are over the 100-minute mark, Bearlissimo, and so I'm going to ask you, do you want to go to the other side of the football, continue on, or do you want to do the other half of our Senior Bowl prospect scouting on our next show?
I mean, if we can run through, because I am going to get short on time, but I think we can run through the edge because there was a couple of guys that really didn't impress. So if you want me to run through the edge guys a little bit quicker, the guys who really impressed me versus the guys who really didn't, that came in with sort of a better level, and then we can see where we are at the end of that.
Okay, excellent. Go for it.
So Terrell Lewis looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Vernon Golston, I don't know if you remember Vernon Golston, the New York Jets drafted.
Absolutely.
Looked like an absolute monster, but played like he's a nightmare, basically, but not in a good way, in the sort of the, oh my God, what is he doing? Terrell Lewis, I'm probably being a bit harsh. I mean, the guy, again, is physically imposing. He's a guy who gives good effort, good motor, but for me, he's a 4-3 left defensive end. He's not a stand-up outside edge rusher. He doesn't have a lot of dip. He doesn't have great hand usage. Once guys get into his pads, he's kind of neutralised. And that for me, certainly, an edge rusher out of Alabama, I expected a lot more. But whether he was up against Pert or Adeniji in the game, he really struggled, I thought. Greenard is the next one. Did very well in the one-on-one drills all week. But with no blitzing on the table, wasn't really able to show his speed that he has on the edge. There was a couple of times he did show his athleticism in pursuit, and he would look very, very quick. So at his size, that's encouraging, because if he does have bend, which he does show on tape for Florida, he is a guy that potentially on the outside could sort of like get upfield suddenly. I know his get-off isn't great, but that's something you can work on in terms of his ability to get off the ball. But he was someone that showed enough upside to be shown. Again, for me, he's a mid to later round guy. He's not. A lot of people talking about his sort of round 3, round 4 kind of range. For me, he's not that. He's slightly lower on the where I would be comfortable drafting him. Two players I would be comfortable drafting based upon their performance was my favourite edge rusher at the game, which is Joshua Uche out of Michigan. One of the things that I thought was he showed that he's very, very smart. He had the opportunity to absolutely murder Herbert in the first drive of the game, and he didn't, because he knows he's a first-round quarterback. He sort of did a two-hand touch on his shoulders, but he was coming at him that quickly, he could have literally just obliterated him, and he was sensible enough to take a step away. But consistently, his hand usage was excellent on the outside. He was able to set a strong edge against the run. Consistently the fastest person off the ball. Played with good strength at his weight because he's a little bit lighter. Working from a wide 9 position, which he did a couple of times, he's got enough speed to be able to get into the backfield before the tackle can get out to where he is. But he's got good enough hand usage, whether he's at a 7, so on the outside shade of the tackle. When he's in a 7, he's able to win there as well with his hand usage. So I would love to have him opposite Khalil Mack, because he would make a. Another guy who was impressive was Bradley Anae, obviously defensive MVP. He stole a show, and I think he needs to thank Joshua Uche a lot for several of his sacks, because they were chased into him. But again, with Anae, you don't get the athleticism you get with Uche. What you do get is really good technique and hand usage and some nice counters. Plays with a nice pad level. He's stronger probably than Uche is, but sacrifices some of that strength to speed. So not quite as quick. Has a really nice double hand swipe and dip getting around the corner. He's very alert to where the ball is and where it isn't. And he plays with a really high motor, so he's a really good guy. Zach Bourne, I'm not even sure if he played. I don't think he did. He did well the first day of training camp, but seemed to disappear from there, so I'm not sure if he was injured. So Cameron Brown, Penn State, he looks very similar physically to Leonard Floyd. He plays very similar to Leonard Floyd, i.e. Not a lot of juice as a pass rusher. He looks long and gangly, plays long and gangly, tries to run around blockers when he's asked to play in the middle of the field, but does offer very, very good coverage skills for a guy of his side. Struggles disengaging from blockers who get into his chest. He plays at 100 miles an hour all of the time, but quite often that's out of control because he's trying to make up for running around people instead of through them. Doesn't seem to like the physicality of the position. He's a day 3 undrafted free agent guy for me, but once you get him into an NFL weight program, potentially he offers you what you get with Leonard Floyd, only you're not going to pay $13 million to get it.
Exactly. He's a super bright guy. I interviewed him and talked to him a couple of times. Really super bright and very engaging, great personality. His favorite player growing up was Brian Urlacher. So he's got some Chicago Bears bloodlines, so to speak. And he kind of caught my interest, but your evaluation on his play, I think, is spot on. I think he's the kind of guy who can come on and perhaps help out in special teams, deep down in the roster, and perhaps develop into a serviceable linebacker. And some people were even talking about him maybe moving into a safety position, kind of a hybrid position. We'll keep an eye on that. All right, let's save the defensive backs and more Senior Bowl talk for our next show. What do you say?
I'd love to.
All right. This has been a ton of fun going over this with you. And I'm telling you, you did your homework. You really studied that tape. Any closing thought that you have that you want to share with your listeners?
Just obviously with what's happened this week in terms of people understanding their mortality, just cuddle those people that are close to you. Appreciate your kids every single day. Try not to be angry with each other. We all have different perspectives. Just try and appreciate that we are all humans trying to make the right decisions in life, and sometimes we get it wrong. So try and use all the information to your hand. Think about the person as a whole, not just the take that you see in front of you, and be kind to each other.
That is about as perfect as it can be said. Thank you very much, George Bayliss, Bearlissimo. Make sure you tune in next week, and the podcast version will be out shortly. All of you people in the chat room, thank you for coming in live, and let people know about Bearlissimo. Take care. The Joshua Kelly interview was provided by Cover One. You can find the entire interview on their YouTube channel, Cover One.
Hello everyone, my name is Alec Lifshos, aka Trey Busy, and I'm here to have a conversation with you guys about mental health. A lot of times in our communities, we don't talk about mental health enough, and it goes under the radar as a reoccurring issue. So I took the liberty to create the Let's Talk It Out podcast. This podcast was created to break the silence on mental health issues and to give a voice to those suffering. I have conversations with professionals in the mental health field as well as those who are suffering, and we break down different ways to stomp stigmas and ways to cope with mental health conditions. The show is broadcasted live every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Mixlr.com/LTIO podcast. That's MIXLR.com/LTIO podcast. If you can't make the live recording of the podcast, then you can find the podcast available to you on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Give the podcast a follow on Twitter and Instagram at LTIO Podcast on both platforms. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the future.